Os, YouTube. This has been a long time coming. Sonic Adventure has always interested me as a child, and like always, I didn't own a Sega system, but one of my cousins did. And one time, he had a demo disc, and if he had the full game, I would have spent that weekend trying to beat it. But instead, I spent my time doing something else. Anyway, I was always chomping at the bit to get my hands on that game, and I did once the enhanced GameCube port released, the version I'll be reviewing today off my Nintendo Wii. It's the Blue Blur's first real adventure into 3D, and he's joined by old friends, new characters, and enemies alike. When you really break down the pieces of what makes up this game, there's a lot to take in. But I'm not here to give you a retrospective. I'm not here to just review the main campaign. I've fully completed this game, all 130 emblems, and all missions completed. I'm here to fully analyze the Sonic Adventure experience and to express why this was a fantastic transition into the third dimension.
Sega! Sonic Team.
While this version is what we would consider a remaster nowadays, it still shows you why it was a flagship title for the Sega Dreamcast. The opening movie does its best to get you hyped up, and the start screen does its best to wake up everyone in your neighborhood at 2 in the morning. But from there, you open up the adventure mode to find out that there are 6 playable characters to possibly choose from. If the game didn't force you to start off as Sonic T. Hedgehog. The game wastes no time showing off its new 3D environment and Sonic's new voice.
Oh yeah! This is happening!
And before throwing you into a stage to get you used to the movement, we have a boss fight with an odd water monster. You can even test out Sonic's new move, the homing attack. Well, new if you haven't played 3D Blast, but not everyone was as blessed as I was as a child. Eggman agrees as he laughs maniacally at Sonic's unawareness of this fact, but also the unknown power of chaos. The next day we find Sonic chilling out, maxing, relaxing all cool, catching some Z's outside by the pool, only to be awakened by Tails crashing somewhere on the beach.
Tails!
Emerald Coast is our first stage, and it does its best to live up to our first stage expectations. Green and close. Wait, we're actually on the coast this time. We get to run through sand. Emerald Coast is really good representation of Sonic level in 3D when you break it down. The loops, the turns, the shortcuts, alternate paths that take a bit of skill to get to, it's all here. What's also here is the return of the spin dash, and it's... well, we'll get back to that later, but it's useful to say the least, even if I do think it has a bit too much kick to it. Even the way Sonic interacts with slopes and rolling into a ball and speeding up works. While not one-to-one to the classics, it still feels like it should. As most 3D conversions go, it's as good as it gets, at least in terms of just being Sonic the Hedgehog. To be a bit more diegetic, Tails is our goalpost, and after a quick rescue, he tells us that he was testing out a new plane that uses the Chaos Emerald as a power source. He invites us back to his workshop in the Mystic Ruins to check it out. And after this conversation, we've earned the right to play as our two-tailed fox pal. We won't be doing that. Right about now would be the time you notice that Sonic Adventure isn't a level-to-level video game. You have an overworld that's broken into smaller areas called the Adventure Field. It's where you'll be having your boss fights and get to levels themselves, but you can also talk to the NPCs and see what's going on with them. If you ever feel like you're lost and you don't know what to do, an NPC could probably lead you in the right direction. Or this ball of light that just tells you what to do and where to go. Normally I walked you through the game beat for beat while discussing plotting, gameplay mechanics, and piecemeal, but there's 6 characters here with their own mechanics and character arcs. I'm gonna try to go a little faster than normal, please mind me if I don't. Sonic's story is a simple game of cat and mouse with Eggman. We collect Chaos Emeralds that he needs to power up Chaos and rule the world. Our next 3 levels and boss fight express this. But after one-upping Sonic and Tails at every turn, even getting Knuckles involved, Eggman shows his hand by revealing his massive airship, the Egg Carrier. Knuckles has important business to do, so Sonic and Tails fly off trying to catch up in the tornado and a cool shoot-'em-up section. Suck it, original Sky Chase Zone. But they are thwarted once again and shot out of the sky. Why'd they do that? Separated, Sonic has to try and find Tails, but he gets a bit distracted. Either way, everything leads back to Eggman and he meets up with Tails for another chance at the flying base, and this time they make it on board, even with some issues. And then it's a who's who of everyone converging in one way or another on the airship. Sonic makes his way to Chaos, who's absorbed 6 emeralds by now, but still manages to defeat it, but Eggman also manages to get away. Chasing after him, Sonic finds himself in the thick jungle of the Mystic Ruins and runs through an ancient temple by following the tutorial light ball. There we see a mural of an ancient monster and see visions of a horrific past. Well, that was weird. Anyway, we see Eggman's base at the foot of the cliff and enter the final stage to take him out once and for all. And with all's well that ends well, we finish Sonic's campaign. About 300-400 words, not that bad. The narrative itself is pretty much what you'd expect from Sonic the Hedgehog. Eggman do bad, go stop, but it's the first time he's been voiced in a game like this, and his cool, laid-back attitude and sense of justice make themselves clear. He's constantly on the back foot, but he never gives up. He may has his own way of doing things, but he can believe in his friends when he needs them the most, and trust their own judgment on matters they know best. But that doesn't mean he can't get a bit catty with them and tease them every now and then when they've made a mistake. While Sonic doesn't particularly have an arc and change in this story, Sonic's a special little ball of self-expression. He exudes confidence and coolness as easily as breathing. A little cocky, a little impatient, but a compassionate creature to his core. His design may be a little different, but he's the hedgehog we've all come to know and love. Sonic's gameplay is just as simple as his story. Get to the end of the stage. Each stage, however, brings its own form of challenges and gimmicks, ranging from collecting enough rings in a pinball table to dealing with an airship changing altitude. If there's something that stands out for Sonic's levels, it's the set pieces, each one riding on the definition of cool. From outracing an avalanche on a snowboard to running down a skyscraper, little extra bits of gameplay changes help spice things up and space out simple point A to point B platforming challenges that make up his gameplay, like adding a karting section to Twinkle Park because Sonic Team just felt like showing off at that point. As for his evolution into the third dimension, it's done fairly well for what it is. He can still roll down slopes to gain speed, jump off enemies, and fling himself off hills and ramps to reach great heights. But with the extra dimension, a new move was added to ease with dealing with enemies. The homing attack allows Sonic to attack enemies quickly and accurately in a 3D space. Most of the time, there's just a few things you have to remember about it. While it can do some crazy homing loops, it does have an initial range to work in the first place. The second is that you can't homing attack enemies above you. Now you might be going, Hawk, I've done homing attack chains going upward before. But that's only because Sonic pops up after hitting an enemy. It's that extra height that moves you upward. In fact, it's that extra height that makes the homing attack more reliable than just mashing your way through it and ruining yourself. But I can also admit that it's not perfect all the time, especially when the camera doesn't feel like helping you. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh yeah, the spin dash. It's weird in this game. Sonic can roll into a ball in this game just by running and tapping the B button. In fact, Knuckles and Tails can also do that. But the spin dash takes priority for our blue little hedgehog, so he'll do a little charge. You keep moving forward, but if you keep tapping the B button, it's like you have a boost button from the modern games. It's great for blasting through levels, for time trials, but I think it looks kinda tacky myself. One of Sonic Team's biggest questions in designing this game was, how do we make a game longer than Sonic 3 and Knuckles? Well, they decided to make a 3D Sonic the Hedgehog platforming video game. And something else. And that is the basis of the rest of our playable characters. It's a sliding dial from being like Sonic the Hedgehog to being something else. But even then, it's a bit more complicated than that, because some characters might have the same objective as Sonic the Hedgehog, get to the end of the stage, but some characters might just play a bit more similar to Sonic the Hedgehog than other characters, in terms of movement and abilities. But I think the one thing Sonic Team wanted to give all of these characters is a sense of tension, a sense of excitement. There's always something pushing you forward. So forward we shall go with our next character. Up next is Sonic's best friend, Miles Tails Prower. Now, Sonic Adventure is a game where stories intersect and characters share scenes, so most of Tails' scenes we've seen. We start off with him doing his test flight and get a crashing sequence, but after meeting up with Sonic, we've seen everything up until they crash after being blasted out of the sky. That being said, these repeating scenes are still fun to rewatch because they redo their lines and the focus changes on whoever the player character is. But after the crash, Tails has a dream about how he first met Sonic. He landed in the Mystic Ruins, and after a quick Emerald trip with a frog and another vision of the past, he fixes up the Tornado 2 and meets back up with Sonic. Blah blah blah.
I hate it when he doesn't listen to me.
Blah blah blah.
Hey, this ship is losing altitude.
And then him and Amy make their way out of there while Sonic finishes up the rest. They land next to Station Square, but Tails finds Eggman also crashing down. He's lost everything but still wants to blow up the city. He fires off one final rocket, but
No, it was a dud. I can't believe this.
he goes off to rearm it himself, and Tails gathers up all of his courage to face off with Eggman all alone. It's one final race through Speed Highway and a missing boss fight, but Tails manages to save the day all by himself. He meets back up with Sonic and the two share how their adventures ended before credits roll. It feels like Sonic Team really looked back at their past catalog of every game that came out to help build up how these characters would act in this new 3D iteration, and it really shows itself with Tails. I always felt like Tails coming back to save Sonic with a modified Tornado in Sonic 2 was always a cool visual, but they really just picked up that idea and ran off with it. Even before this game, if you want to take Tails' adventure into account, he is a boy genius and whiz mechanic, so this game really feels like a continuation of all of the prior games that came before it. But it's not just the background material that they worked with, but his backstory for his debut as well. Tails was someone who was bullied before he met Sonic, and one day he just decided to follow this cool, fast guy that he saw. His story revolves around that aspect of his character. How to grow into a more independent person that gets started before the plot even gets rolling. We open in on him wanting to build his own plane for himself. The theme is set in the background, but by the time we get halfway through into the Mystic Ruins, the story has pushed it into the foreground with the completion of the Tornado 2. And then you add the climax with overcoming Eggman all by himself on top, and it's the perfect little character arc that takes something almost subconscious and turns it into a conscious desire, and that's what makes it great. I hope you can now understand why the writing in Sonic Frontiers with Tails rubbed me the wrong way. Sure, characters can have repeating character arcs, but it felt so... This is the first time that this has happened, and I've talked about it. Like, I guess it was the first time he ever talked to Sonic about it, but he's gaining independence, he doesn't need it, and the second game that comes after this is so... Anyway, Sonic Adventure did a good job with Tails, I really liked it. His gameplay, however, personally leaves just a bit to be desired. Everyone in Sonic Adventure other than Sonic has some sort of extra gimmick put on top of their playstyle. Tails is the closest in that he too has a normal point A to point B platforming level, but he has to race someone to the finish. That's fine, it's just that his advantage is his ability to fly, and it's done pretty well for a conversion. It's just that they also give him dash rings. It adds another dimension to the levels, and it's fun, it really is, but I just feel like I'm skipping through most of the level than actually playing it most of the time, so I can't say they aren't being true to the classics. I think Tails suffers the most from everyone in this game having to share the same levels. And don't get me wrong, there's generally an area in each level for a character specifically for them. I think Skydeck is pretty good for Tails in the first half, and I think Speed Highway overall is mostly designed for him than it is Sonic. I just think it would have helped if he had a bit more to himself. Next up is a character that doesn't chuckle, Knuckles, the Echidna. Knuckles' story takes place at the very start. The egg carrier looms in the storm clouds near the floating Angel Island, and Knuckles ruminates on his born duty as the guardian of the Master Emerald. But then a loud crash happens and it gets his attention. A monster is standing before the broken Master Emerald, and as Knuckles is knocked aside, it escapes the island and falls in the sea below. I don't know what it is about Knuckles falling down these stairs. I don't know if I'm impressed or it's just really funny. Like, it's a really good camera zoom out and angle, and it looks like it would hurt so much. Knuckles' mission is now to search for the broken pieces of the Master Emerald that have fallen around Station Square in the Mystic Ruins. As he searches for them, he has these visions of the past like everyone else, but they're more frequent than anyone else. The first one is about this girl that we've been seeing arguing with her father about the atrocities that their Echidna tribe have been committing. After waking up and wondering what happened to these two, he finds Eggman, who has a Chaos Emerald. One boss fight and upgrade later, we run into Sonic, who has a Chaos Emerald. And then for the third and final time, we kill Chaos 4. You big drip. Side note, I find it really funny that the important business Knuckles talked about was him just finding more pieces of the emerald. Let's not worry about this giant airship. Sonic and Tails can handle that. Knuckles, you were part of the problem. You should help a little bit. In the meantime, we have another flashback of the girl talking to the Master Emerald itself about her father's lust for war and violence. We're then transported back to the altar, but we're still missing some shards. Through the power of clairvoyance, we make our way to the egg carrier, get those shards, see the aftermath of the village trying to use the Chaos Emeralds, and have our own tussle with Chaos 6. Good job, Knuckles, now you're picking up the slack. The egg carrier falls into the sea once more, and we finally completed the Master Emerald. Knuckles once again thinks about his duty, but is at peace with it. Compared to everyone else, Knuckles' story is a bit more thoughtful, a bit more introspective. Knuckles has a clear goal, protect the Master Emerald, but why does he do it? It's his duty and he takes it in stride, but when his island is in crisis once again, he starts to find out that there's more to it than keeping the island afloat. That's why he gets the most flashbacks out of the entire cast, because they relate to him on a personal level unlike the rest. They tell him what his ancestors were actually like, their beliefs, their actions, and at the end of it all, he understands that a tragedy took place because of those actions and takes solace in the fact that knowing just that is enough for him to push on. Knuckles is characterized not so much by his actions, but the actions of his clan and how they affect not just him but the world around him. The strong warriors who pushed forward even to their own detriment, and the almost shrine maiden-like girl who wished for peace and harmony. Both represent our Red Echidna, who's so focused on his problems that he attacks his friends, but doing so because he wants to fulfill his duty to protect the Master Emerald that badly. It's a very good reflection. Much like Sonic, Knuckles doesn't really change, but he literally starts and ends the story the same way, but has a deeper understanding of his situation by the end of it all, as do we. So what about its gameplay? In a world where 3D platformers have already found their style, Knuckles takes full advantage of what's already been established. Unlike Sonic and Tails, Knuckles has to find 3 pieces of the Master Emerald in an open 3D space. It's a simple game of hot and cold where exploring the level is even more pertinent than ever. In terms of movement, he's just the same as Sonic and Tails, with his signature gliding making a return. You move around and see if your Emerald radar goes from green to red, far to close. They could be out in the open, inside an enemy, or maybe in the ground. You need to really get a grasp on each area for pieces inaccessible without opening a door or using a spring first. By the end of the level, you should have a really good lay of the land. Or you could just follow the balls of light littered around the stage that just point you in the right direction. The levels aren't really big enough for you to get lost in or have a hard time, to be honest. If the emerald isn't closed off by a level gimmick or in a hard to reach area, the orbs can really just make it a bit too brain dead. If there's one more complaint with Knuckles other than being kinda easy, it's that his punches don't get a lot of use. This is the first game where he really gets to use them. I mean, other than Sonic the Fighters, but you know. And it's not like it's particularly his fault, because his punches are fine, it's just there aren't a lot of grounded enemies, and even if they are on the ground, it's really best to jump into them. Try again. But this time, let's get to someone new with a familiar playstyle. While not her debut, one character who's changed the most with this new installment was Amy Rose. Amy is an interesting character to bring into this game. While she was created in Sonic CD, most teams made sure to include her in most of the spin-off games, but she's finally has her playable debut now. Amy is now a city girl who misses her thrilling adventures with the titular blue hedgehog, but when Eggman's airship flies over Station Square, a tiny blue bird flies down and crashes right into her. But that's not the only thing that's landed. A large green bulky robot starts chasing the two and she ducks away into the nearby shop. Safe for now, Amy decides out of the kindness of her heart that she will help and protect this bird. But as we run through the city, the NPCs tell us that Sonic is around and Amy can't think of no one better to help her with than him. While messing around, the robot, Zero, relocates them, and Amy tries her best to throw him off her trail in Twinkle Park. Have a date with Sonic in Twinkle Park. Despite her best efforts, Amy gets captured anyway. While locked in the cell on the egg carrier, another one of Eggman's robots requests that she gives up the bird. But through the power of existentialism and pity, through the power of care and love, the robot seems to gain a bit of its own will and tells the two to escape. And after bumbling through another level, because she's not going to get a lot of them, Amy gets her designated flashback to see that Tikal wasn't the only one who stayed at the Master Emerald's altar. We return and make our way to the bridge, only to find that the reason Eggman was chasing this little bird around was to get the Chaos Emerald it was holding. With our usefulness at its end, he orders our robot savior, Gamma, to finish us all off. But being thankful, Amy stops the fight with Sonic, and with the help of Tails, she makes it back to Station Square. The game would be over, but while the little bird is presumably safe, we haven't figured out where their lost family is, so our new mission is now to find them. We head to the Mystic Ruins and find Eggman's base. With no other leads, we try to find answers and run into the Zero robot once again. Out of luck, Amy realizes that Birdie escaped from the egg carrier. We head back there and actually find his family, but we're assaulted by Zero once more. Finally having enough, Amy destroys the robot, and it's happily ever after for everyone. She's a changed girl. Next time Sonic sees her, it will be too late. While just a touch more subtle, Amy is right up there with Tails in having a clear character arc. She's bored and wants a bit of adventure, and her call to adventure is Birdie, but that desire comes from her past with Sonic, and he too comes to help at the start of her journey as well. Also, like Tails, her character is mostly built up by her past side games, giving her a solid background, her Pico Pico hammer coming from Sonic's The Fighters. Her most outstanding trait is her compassion for others. She finds someone in trouble and her first instinct is to help them. She sees an emotionless robot and she feels sorry that it doesn't seem to have a heart, and when it gains one, she stands up for them and wants the best for them. And it's this belief in other people changing that rounds out her change. She starts off running from Zero, to relying on Sonic so much that she lets her guard down, to finally deciding to fight back for someone else's happiness. She completes her mission. The birdie found its family, and she learned that she doesn't need Sonic to have a heart-pounding adventure, but that doesn't mean she doesn't still want to chase him around, but now she doesn't have to wait. As for her gameplay, it's returned to simple point A to point B platforming. The trick this time is that she's being chased through the levels by the Zero robot. It's not really that threatening when you realize that it's super slow to actually attack you, even if Amy herself is painfully slow compared to everyone else. Her speed not fitting her body is the most off-putting thing, but her jumps are there to try and make up for it. They also try to put in these... puzzles is too strong of a word. They put in these distractions that try to spice things up, but it's more so tedious than it is interesting. I kinda can get behind the idea of being chased. If you hit the robot about 3 times, it becomes invincible and it won't take any damage or fall over ever again, really making you want to move forward, but it's is just so slow. Even with the tension as high as it is, there's this whole gimmick of hiding in barrels that's worthless. It's an interesting idea, but if only she was a little faster. Anytime the levels play with verticality or long jumps, it's really interesting, but it's too far and in between. Also, who took those birds' picture? Who made that locket? Who put that Chaos Emerald in there? Those are the real questions that need to be answered. But all this adventuring is tiring me out. Wish I could just take a break. Big the Cat. I think I'll take my time and fish a little bit. Big the Cat is our first brand new playable character to this game, and he's here to slow things down. We open up on a peaceful night until a familiar drop of water falls from the sky. Big's pet, Froggy, goes to check it out. He comes back with a new tail and an appetite for a Chaos Emerald. After eating it, it runs off, and so does the giant cat, chasing down his rogue Pollywog pal. From the bustling city of Station Square to the jungles of the Mystic Ruins, he's always one step behind his froggy friend. It's only when following the mechanical Gamma does he manage to corner his friend on the egg carrier. But he too is given a vision of the past about the Master Emerald, the controller of the 7 Chaos Emeralds. But on our way out, we run into Eggman and Chaos. We learn that Froggy's new tail actually belongs to Chaos, and the amphibian gives up both his tail and the Chaos Emerald as it's eaten by the monster. With our excellent fishing skills, we get our friend back and let the heroes do what they need to do best, and take Tails' Tornado 2 back to his hut in the Mystic Ruins. And all there is left to say is that wasn't a lazy day. Big's story and campaign is here to intentionally slow the pace, the simplest to understand because of his plot and his character. He's a background character in a story full of strong players moving the narrative around. You see other characters carrying on the most in his story and only run into Tails before the end with Sonic. Even those interactions are small and inconsequential. The irony of this large character playing such a small role isn't lost on me. He's just a guy who wants his buddy back, and he does just that. At the end of the day, it's all a matter of presentation and preference. I can kinda understand where developers were coming from with this intentional pumping of the brakes, but also that's what side content is for instead of a whole playthrough, no matter how short it is. It's quite the big adventure for such a short playtime. And by short playtime, I mean like 30 minutes with cutscenes, 8 minutes if we're just talking about the stages. Big the Cat plays drastically different than everyone else. Amy may be slow, but she still has the same objective as Sonic and does traditional platforming. Knuckles may have a different objective in his levels, but he moves like Sonic and Tails for the most part. Big the Cat fishes. I'd complain how slow he is, but that doesn't matter. He's like a mini-game that you're forced to play because you have to unlock all the stories to get something at the end. His fishing isn't even hard. You press the action button to throw your line. You bait the fish by moving your control stick around. You hold down on the stick when you get a bite, and you alternate your reeling speed with fast and slow to not max out the meter and break your line. It's honestly really simple, and once again, the game is nice enough to tell you how to play if you choose to read. But I get why this can throw some people off. I came here to play a Sonic game, not Sega Bash fishing. And while I'm Mr. Wacky, what exactly is a Sonic game anyway? There's always a line in the sand, and we've clearly crossed it. In and of itself, the fishing in this game is pretty okay for what the campaign wants you to do. Big also has some of the most explorable areas in this game, secret areas and coves just so he can catch more fish. It's honestly so short and simple it's inoffensive to me. The hardest thing to do is actually find Froggy, and he's generally at the start of most levels, meaning that those hidden areas don't even matter. Oh, I better mention this now. Characters get upgrades in this game. A lot of them are just story focused to help you progress through the plot, and Big's are probably the most useless in his main story, which are a lure upgrade and a water ring. Those lure upgrades will come in handy later, but not now, not here. But we're finally at our final playable character of the game, and we're back to our majority point A to point B gameplay with the metallic E102 Gamma. We awaken to Eggman's beautiful face, and he sends us off on a test of our abilities. While Gamma's movement is fairly normal, though his body size make it a little bit awkward, his gimmick is that his stages are timed. If you run out of time, you lose a life, but you can get more time back by gunning enemies down for a continuous lock-on combo. We take out these fun Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles plushies, but we have one more task, which is to take out our predecessor, E101 Beta. The winner will be let on the egg carrier, and that's us. Our mission, along with the rest of our brothers, is to capture a familiar tailed frog, but in turn, we are captured by a familiar ball of light. Once again, transported into the past to learn about the Chow, their protector, and the indifferent echidnas who care not for their habitat. We snap back to reality and give Eggman his frog, but see our brothers teleported to who knows where and without any care. We're ordered to retrieve a captive, but we make the wrong turn and see the horrors of mechanical life being manipulated. When he said Beta would come too, I didn't think it'd be like this. Anyway, we go to the right room and we get brainwashed and letting a little girl and her pet bird roam free. We awaken to justice. We pick up a cool hover jet and head outside for our battle against Sonic, but just before we can finish the fight, Amy asks us to stop, so of course we have to stand our queen and listen to her. Still not understanding why she would help us, she states that she just wants what's best for us, which would mean leaving that bad Eggman behind, and as the ship is going down, we do so literally. But as we float down to the Mystic Ruins and run through our days past events, we also do so figuratively. New mission, save our friends, the E-Series. And save them we do, by blowing them up, and releasing the animals that reside inside of them. And after doing so a few times, we come to realize that there are only 2 of us left. We have a funky battle with an upgraded Beta, and then finally self-destructing ourselves, freeing the animal inside. Those 2 birds look familiar to me. Unlike every other character, Gamma gets a full self-contained story. Wakes up, gains sentience, kills his brothers and himself. I was gonna make a speedrunning joke, but now I'm kinda depressed when I say it out loud like that. When you dive into it, it's an interesting little story. Sonic has always had a nature versus technology theme going on in the background, and they don't even shy away from mixing the two naturally. However, it's never been personified like this in a game, and Gamma is the personification. Even OVA Metal Sonic can eat its metallic heart out. Eggman captures animals and does his best to try and take away their free will, but as you watch every robot, you find out that he either can't do that completely, or the E-Series awakened something unexpectedly. And to further that awakening, you have Amy just showing unbiased kindness to everything that she sees, and doing that twice fully awakens a robotic heart. And that awakening means destroying his brothers and freeing the animals inside. You'd think Amy might have awakened the animal's own will, like a small mech pilot, but it's as if the animal and robot have created a true symbiosis. Gamma isn't just the animal inside or the robot, they're both. This is held up by the fact that Beta wanted to go on the ship even though it lost, and Gamma reacting on his own to the blue flicky that accompanied Amy. This gives Gamma his own personality and agency, and this makes destroying the other E-Series robots all the more somber. Something was lost, but in turn, something was saved. That's at least how I read it. As for the gameplay, it's time to shoot 'em up. Gamma follows Sonic's basic lead in game structure, but he brings back the meaning of these games keeping track of your time. The clock runs down, and if it runs out of time, you lose a life. You get more time by killing enemies. Gamma locks on the shoot, so the more enemies you lock onto, the larger your combo, the more time you rack up. I wouldn't say Gamma's platforming is high speed, but the hover upgrade somehow manages to stand out even when compared to Tails and Knuckles, giving you unique situations. The rush of blowing up everything that stands in your way as the clock counts down and you try your best to rack it back up is pretty exhilarating and gives you a fast pace that you can't find with anyone else. Then you add in that most stages end with a boss fight, it gives you an even fresher feeling, even if you don't have to move to kill most of them. But with all of that out of the way, we've finally gotten through our whole roster of playable characters. So while we've unlocked a new, going back to overview a few things from the story would be best before wrapping it all up. Sonic Adventure is the definition of bold. 2D platformer narratives weren't the most fleshed out, but the jump to 3D gave a lot of them a kick in the pants. But I still consider Sonic Adventure something special with its split character stories and overarching narrative. Each character is a piece in the greater puzzle of Eggman is trying to rule the world with a giant airship and an ancient water monster. While the stopping Eggman part is played as straight as usual, it's the ancient creature that gets focused on in the background with small vignettes to an ancient civilization's past, all focusing on a tribe girl, the Chaos Emeralds, Chao, and the one who protects them. However, these two plotlines are what glues our characters together. It's still a character-driven narrative after all, each playthrough giving insight to each one of them. Something interesting they do with repeating scenes, as I said before, is that they give the focus to whoever you're playing as. The dialogue is tweaked, there's different line readings giving you different perspectives on the situation, like the fight with Knuckles. Or Sonic running into Amy. But that's not the only thing that connects them. The world they live in is one that reacts to the events around them, and some have their own lives that they live independent to the plot. While the floating ball of light will always tell you where to go, the newsstand in Station Square will give you an in-universe take on the current events. The other NPCs are just as reactive. You might find one that gives you a tutorial because you didn't bother to read it the first time. They have their own plot lines going on, such as the train strike that conveniently keeps you in Station Square so you don't get lost. Some rando is two-timing two girls, or there's a mom with a gambling problem. Most people knowing Amy by name in Station Square is very endearing, but then they proceed to give her Sonic's location, which is hilarious. They even react to cutscenes. Look at Bro, he's flabbergasted after seeing the egg carrier. At least the strike seemed to have worked out. That little girl got to see her dad again, and those guys got a raise, I think. Good for them. Another thing keeping these characters connected is the plot point with the Chaos Emeralds. While not an origin story, it does put some things into context. Generally, whenever a character has a Chaos Emerald in hand, they get a flashback to the Echidna tribe and their situation at the time. It's hard to say if they've recently found the Chaos Emeralds or if they were always there, because Tikal speaks as if they're just now using them to further their expansion than normal. It's those private moments that make it feel like it's something new and something special just to her that her father then decides to trample upon. And well, they did. Hats off to them too. They set that fountain on fire. That's pretty impressive. And then you have the mural in Lost World that depicts the monster that they've wrought upon themselves, carved out by probably the last of their tribe as a warning to not commit the same atrocities they did. Either way, to get to the bottom of all of this, we gotta go pick that last character. Strap in tight because this is all cutscenes and running around until we get to the end. We get a lot of setup. A shot of the Tornado 2, catching up with Eggman, Knuckles falling back into the ocean below. Nothing's going right, and Sonic and Tails go to check on Angel Island first. Eggman and Knuckles have been attacked by a returning Chaos and has taken 6 of the Chaos Emeralds Knuckles had with him. Before they can race to the last one on the Tornado 2, Sonic gets one final vision. Not only does he see the events that lead to the downfall of the Echidna tribe, he sees how Chaos was sealed within the Master Emerald hundreds of years ago. But we don't have time for that, we gotta get to the Tornado 2, just in time for Chaos to slurp up that emerald. The game's opening cinematic plays out and the city's looking kinda rough, but look who's come to help. It's Tikal. She's been leading us around this whole time. That was nice of her. Let's all pretend to be surprised. She's even willing to seal Chaos back inside the Master Emerald, but Sonic brings up the fact that that won't solve its problem of its unending rage. Chaos has used up a lot of the Chaos Emerald's powers, but as Tails states,
Chaos only used the negative power of the emeralds. Sonic, you should be able to harness their real power.
The crowd cheers, the music builds up, and Sonic transforms into Super Sonic. It's pretty cool. It's really cool. I really like this. While Super Sonic was required to get the true ending of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, this is the first time it's ever been made mandatory to just finish the game, and it's given the gravitas it deserves. The opening theme, Open Your Heart, kicks in, and you have to dodge attacks to gain enough speed to climb up the water monster's body and blast through its head to deal damage. Do this 8 times and you've beaten the game. Chaos's anger has been quelled and is at peace knowing that the child live in harmony with the people on Earth. Tikal thanks us in a sentence with the creature, as Tails says,
All's well that ends well, right?
I guess. But Sonic sees Eggman getting away and runs off for another adventure. Very impactful. Stakes have never been higher, seeing as a whole city actually got destroyed this time. Oops. If I'm being honest, while the final act does bring everything together, it feels a little slow until you get to the FMV. Like I said, you're just running from cutscene to cutscene, and while everyone does get together at the end, one final playable lead up would have just made this hit a bit harder. I don't know, get everybody to do just a little bit of something. Oh well, maybe next time. But it is interesting that while we do just fight the final boss like normal, the context is that we have to find a way to save its spirit. The extra context given to the Chaos Emeralds as reacting to emotions gives them an extra bit of mysticism. Chaos, the ideal, not the monster, is unbiased after all. Though you could say the same for the monster as well in this game. Given kindness and it will act in turn, given rage and hate and it will lash out at you. And then Tikal having her plot weave in from the very start of the game gets wrapped up nicely. Even beyond the grave, she gets just as much agency as everyone else. I don't think Sonic Adventure is that hard to grasp. Its themes, its characters, their arcs, they're all pretty simple. Honestly, I also wouldn't be able to tell you what being deep means either. A lot of things people consider deep I think are shallow and pretentious, but, well, All I can tell you is that I know what a consistent story is, and Sonic Adventure is very consistent with its themes, with its characters. As long as you think about one thing, it will lead you to another, and it just builds up upon itself. But maybe that's deep, who's to say? But with the story out of the way, let's just jump into presentation. You put your disc in, you see your logos, the intro plays the music, it hums, it greeted one of the loudest games in existence. From the outset, the music sets the pace for a bombastic adventure, but it mellows out and it gets a little funky as you explore the menus. Honestly, in terms of soundtracks, Sonic Adventure might be one of the most diverse ones in the whole series, and I will continue to say this sentence as I continue to review these video games. From the rock of Open Your Heart to the funk of Crazy Robo, and everything in between, before and after, musically speaking. Both themes of Red Mountain have the same melody, but they're from two completely separate genres. And then I think the greatest thing that Sonic has ever done was decide to give its title characters completely different musical genres that fit their character themselves. The rock that is Sonic the Hedgehog, the pop that is Amy, the electronic that is Gamma, all of them weave together to give you a very worldly feel. Even in the open world, it's still there, like how Station Square sounds like a song you'd hear in a Japanese supermarket. Are the treble-like drums and vocals from the Misted Ruins? A strong and varied soundtrack aside, what about the graphical design? Well, that's where we run into a bit of a personal bias. You see, what I'm playing for you is Sonic Adventure DX, a GameCube port of the original Dreamcast release. Different graphics, a doubled frame rate, new character models, but the same old skeleton rigs. That clipping is bad. Brand new textures were added to multiple spots in the game. Look at City Hall, it's the greatest example, and I don't even need to boot up the old game to show you. Look at it in the open world section. Now look at it in the stage. The stage is how it looked like previously. See the difference? And then the frame rate being boosted to 60 FPS gives you a mostly smoother experience. Mostly. I think now it's about time we should talk about bugs and glitches, because everyone swears up and down that the original Dreamcast version wasn't this buggy, and I don't know about that. And even if it wasn't, the bugs in the DX port really aren't that bad. I can't speak on the PC version. Yes, I can. I beat that version. It was also fine most of the time. I could recreate most of the bugs people run into this game most of the time. Maybe I will if I feel like it. But the point is, half of those you really gotta try. I've ran into some way crazier bugs. You know the bit in Red Mountain where the ground starts shooting up lava and Sonic gets flung forward? One time, I got flung forward, over the edge, and Sonic fell, and I guess he either A, missed the death plane, or B, when he's in that falling state, he's invisible, and I just fell out the level. I can't get that to happen again, and recently, while I was recording this, I flew Tails to the newsstand, and he just fell through the world. I can't repeat that, but I can get pretty close. At worst, these bugs are going to lose you, 30 seconds of gameplay? There's nothing that will crash your system. There's nothing that will delete your save file. Get over it. Oh, and the broken textures, yeah, it's bad, but who cares? Who actually cares that that grate doesn't have the right texture on the ground? No one. We can talk about irredeemable things and things that should and shouldn't be there, but at the end of the day, none of these bugs will ruin a normal playthrough of this game. And while some of these textures are still different, I think the charm of the Dreamcast version still shines through, even in the DX port. It is a beautiful game for its time, and nothing's going to change that. As for the graphical style, it takes a more realistic/anime approach to it. You have your city like Station Square and your anime like people walking around, but then you have your very inspired South American forest that is the Mystic Ruins. but the stages still fall in line with how the classic games portray themselves. Loops, turns, dash pads littered around the stages, and their varied scopes and themes. From the beautiful beaches of Emerald Coast to the rocky red mountains to not only the nighttime skyscrapers but also the early morning cityscape that is Speed Highway. But it's just as cool as it is pretty with set pieces like being flung through a tornado, out snowboarding an avalanche, or running down said skyscrapers. It's just a shame that it's mostly done with Sonic, but everyone gets a little bit of something. Getting back to the gameplay, I feel like I talked about them well enough by themselves, but how do they blend together? This is a game with multiple characters with different playstyles running through the same stages and areas. Sonic, my name is on the title, Hedgehog runs through most of the areas of this game, but certain levels feel designed for specific characters or have segments specifically built for them. It could be as small as Emerald Coast getting rid of its guardrails for Gamma and putting up tables, to as large as Big the Cat having fully explorable areas to himself in most of his stages. Speed Highway and Red Mountain feel like they were designed for Tails and Knuckles respectively, but they have just enough elements or full sections and set pieces just for Sonic to blast through. I feel like this affected the design philosophy for the stages to open them up, even if let's say someone like Knuckles or Big isn't even in them. There's surprises hidden in nooks and crannies, items in areas that look like you really shouldn't even be there, ways to move around that just go, oh, this goes around here, I didn't know that. A level like Ice Cap feels like an obstacle course while Twinkle Park is full of railroaded attractions. Speed and movement based for Sonic are cryptic and confusing for Amy. No matter the level, everyone gets a little something for themselves. At least the bosses in this game are pitifully easy, even if you have to repeat them, Chaos 4. Most of the bosses in this game are actually okay though, a little easier than our previous 2D games, but some of them can get interesting, funny bugs aside. I learned that if you keep attacking Eggman in the first boss, he won't die. It's pretty funny. One or two of them might have a fun trick like in Chaos 6, where you can take half of his life using up Sonic's and Knuckles' charge move. Why can't you have a weakness like this, Chaos 4? Though I do have to say that most of the characters' final boss fights are pretty good and interesting. Even Super Sonic can be funny when you hope that the game will give you the mercy of counting that last hit even if you run out of rings. It didn't. Then add in the 2 extra missions everyone gets in their stages for even more things to do, even if most of them range from go faster to keep a certain number of rings by the end of the stage. You'd think most of the A-level final missions would give you trouble, but it's actually just the first couple of levels because they got really good at them. They know what they did with Sonic Spin Dash. They abused that for those time trials. You can also tell that they knew how small Knuckles' levels were because all of them have 1-minute time limit missions. This is when I tell you that when you hit restart in this game, it sends you back to the last checkpoint. The last checkpoint in Knuckles levels is when you found the last shard, which means you can just timer scam the whole thing. Or you could just scope out the level itself because when you restart the level in this game, the shards don't move. Find out where they are beforehand and then pick them up within a minute. That's what I did. With tricks like that, everybody was pretty easy to handle, even Gamma, who I thought I'd have a harder time with, but no, just the same first level blues. But the worst by far was Big the Cat, because apparently you need to find all of his lure upgrades to even be able to do his A-ranked mission, or at least that's what I read. It's not hard to get them, but that's not the problem. Alright, the A-ranked mission is to find the 2,000 gram fish. It's not about total weight, but about that one singular fish, and then you also have to catch Froggy, which makes me wonder why the game counts total weight in the first place. And then it doesn't help that the first stage, Twinkle Park, is an RNG mess where you have to catch a couple of fish before a 2 kg fish might even spawn. It's only during this mission do I feel that every complaint that anyone has ever had with the fishing in this game hit me straight in the face. But they'll also say that about Froggy, and Froggy is very easy to get. The reel-in meter goes up way too fast. I can't really pull the fish back one way or the other. It just keeps moving on its own and I lose control, and it's constantly locking up the reel in the first place. Now this is something that I've read, and I don't know if it's true, but it sounds believable enough that it might be a problem with the DX version of this video game. Maybe. I looked online and I found sources that said lowering the frame rate of your PC version might make the fishing easier, so I wonder how hard it really was on the Dreamcast in the first place with just 30 FPS, because there are a couple of FPS problems with this game. No one will tell you about them if it doesn't do a funny glitch, because who cares about Big the Cat? They're too busy worrying about broken textures. But if you want to do things the hard way and mods haven't fixed it yet, let me give you some tips. 1. Be patient. 2, when it's pulling away, just try to pull it left or right. Don't even worry about reeling it back. Like, you want to, but you want to just see if it starts to move. If it starts to move, immediately let go of the stick and then just try to reel. When you reel back, you can reel slow and then reel fast at the same time. Just tap the button, just keep tapping it, just alternate it back and forth to make sure you don't break the reel. If it swims away from you right when you catch it, might as well give up. You can get it back, but you might as well give up. Apparently there's a speedrunning trick to get it to swim towards you, and it happened for me a couple of times. I don't know how it works. Pray to whatever God you believe in. I'll do it for you. RNGesus, please do them a big solid for me. For our final bit of original content, we have the Chow Garden, a virtual pet to take care of while you raise it to run some races. These little buggers are quite complicated, so let's run through it thoroughly so I don't have to try so hard during the next game. So during night, Sonic Team made a simple AI system that reacts to players' actions. They decided to flesh this out for the Chow system in this game. You can pet it, beat it, shake it, bop it. I mean, you can play with it and it will like you, and if you do actually bop it or spin dash it or throw it, it will come to hate you. It has 4 stats: swim, fly, run, and power. Ignore stamina, that's status for the next game. You raise their stats by giving them animals you find from enemies in the stages. Swimming animals work best for swimming, flying ones for flying, so on and so forth. By raising these levels, they do better in the races, and if you beat all 5 races twice, beginner and jewel, you'll be rewarded your emblems for this section of the game. It's pretty simple. Now, because this game is a port that came out after SA2, the Chow revisions are the base for this version. The original version of this game didn't have this nice UI. You just had to stuff its face full of animals and pray that it had enough to max out the stats at 999. Stamina didn't exist, but it still had health points, and if it went to 0, it would die. Which is ironic because Chow naturally grow and then reincarnate, retaining 10% of their skill points. Animals only used to increase base stats, but in SA2 they added a stat growth meter along with clearer level indicator. They broke the 999 limit, so not only do animals have increased stat growth, they also lower the growth of other stats. Growth is an important term here because while you can lose progress, you will not lose those levels that you've already gained. The blue bar go down, the yellow bar stay up, and then turn red when you get enough points. The Chow also adopt the animal parts of the ones that you give them and learn emotes and different skills from different ones. It can learn how to swim backwards from the otter, learn how to draw from the deer, or learn how to put on hats from the koala. Normally, raising a Chow would be a long and tedious process, so I did the only reasonable thing. I cheated. But don't worry, I didn't edit my save file like a big loser. I used a glitch, like a civilized person. This one works even in the original game. You grab an animal and you place it down right in front of your Chow. If you do it right, it will turn to look at you. Then you pick it up and place it down again, and it will act as if you've given your Chow the animal yourself, but you'll still be able to pick it up again and then put it back down again. You let this animation play out and then repeat the process until something gets in your way or your angle just gets messed up. Personally, I would follow a guide to make sure my stats are at the right levels to safely win all of these races, and also I would use one of the special Chow you can find in the adventure field. SA2 brought in a lot of hidden stat growth variables that I think special Chow just have a better chance of having higher levels of. The Chow you'll be racing are also based on SA2, so it's better just to max them all out in the first place. Another tip is that you should definitely let your Chow evolve into an adult. No matter how high your run stat is, or if it walks in the Chow Garden, they're still considered a baby and they will crawl during the races. At least mine did. And this also gives you a good time frame on how long it took me to do all of this. In the original Sonic Adventure, a Chow year was about 1 hour for it to evolve. In Sonic Adventure 2, they boosted that to being 3 hours, which means I maxed out my Chow before I was in the Chow Garden area for longer than 3 hours. And that's the time frame that you have to keep for yourself. If you aren't trying to min-max your time, the Chow Garden is a nice place to relax and interact with something cute. There are 3 total gardens to go to, and it's a nice distraction to sprinkle around your completionist playthrough. The races are just as fun and endearing as the Chow themselves. Goldie's a little sleepyhead, and I've had him for only 3.5 hours, but if anything were to happen to him, I'd kill everyone here and then myself. And if you just want even more content, DX added a mission mode. This is what I would like to call game guide content. You find mission cards in the adventure field, and then they give you a hint on where you find your special objective. It could be there in the adventure field itself, it's most likely going to be in a level. In fact, getting these cards can be kind of a hassle in and of themselves, and then figuring out where they want you to do can be a bit cryptic. Then the missions will either A, be the easiest thing that you've ever done, or kinda suck ass more than it should. So a guide will be appreciated in doing tasks such as saving the Burger Man statue on multiple occasions, or finding that very specific spot in a level. Those are the worst. But there's ones that are just a little bit worse than that. So let's go through some of my favorites. They really make you appreciate the restart feature in this game. But what's most annoying are two of Sonic and Tails' Ice Cap missions. For Tails, you have to do some pretty precise movements on the snowboard, but for Sonic, it's jumps. I lost over 15 lives doing this. Hold up and tap A at the very end of the jump. Very simple, extremely precise. If you bounce up just before the third ramp, you might as well just restart, but hey, who am I to say, give it a try. But that little piece of advice is what helped me dialed in and actually get it. I didn't film that, so I spent 3 more tries to get it again, and I did, so, you know, it's consistent at least. But what does doing all of this give you if you're playing the original release? Nothing at all. But for the port, if you get 130 emblems, it lets you run around as Metal Sonic in Sonic stages. It's just a skin, but it's interesting. Not really worth it. As for mission mode, that's related to the other extra of this port. They also brought over all of Sonic's Game Gear games. As you collect more emblems, you unlock more games, but a few of them are also attached to completing mission mode as well. Why does Tails' adventure look so dark compared to everything else? I'm not going into the intricacies of this Game Gear emulation, I don't care. You might be asking, Hawk, why go so far? And well, just like all of my other game reviews, I want to know what makes this game tick, how developers wanted you to learn the ins and outs of its gameplay, the secrets they put in for fun, and in doing so, see what will carry on in future titles. There's some very obvious stuff that will carry on, but it'll just feel different. That's basically all I got. I mean, comparing it to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I mean, what do you want? They took the very basic, we have 3 playable characters, they're all slightly different versions of each other, running through slightly different levels, except Tails, but they just took that and then exponentially made that way more than before. We have more characters, we need to make them all even more different than they were before. We have a larger story, alright, we need to make it more interesting than it's ever been before. We have more levels that we need to put in 3D, alright, let's do that to the best of our abilities, and they did it. In terms of getting people used to the 3D environment, they might have tried too hard, because the first couple of levels are a bit too easy, and the last couple of levels might be a bit too hard. They will just throw you down a pit and go, we put enough platforms down there, they'll be fine. But honestly, if you get through Sonic, no one else should give you any real trouble. They might be annoying in that they aren't Sonic and they aren't playing like Sonic, but in terms of difficulty, it's not hard. It's all about how much you want to engage with the game design. Knuckles is a game of hot and cold in very small areas that hardly have any rooms in them. Biggs fishing isn't hard. Though, what is annoying is that even if you get all those lure upgrades, it doesn't feel like it helps catching Froggy. I think the hardest time that I've ever had with any character is Gamma, and if you have a hard time with Gamma, you aren't interacting with the game well enough. You run forward, hold the B button, and then you let it go. There's nothing difficult about that. Lock onto as many enemies as you can, and let go. Honestly, with this game, more so than learning a new technique, or a new move, or anything that matters in terms of gameplay, the levels themselves stand out as the main things that are being played here. If you learn the level, you've basically beaten the game, much like classic Sonic games. Yeah, I love the Insta-Shield, but the Insta-Shield helps exemplify what's already there. The strong base is the level design, and I think that's still here. And what else I think is here is just the very essence of Sega and what it was at the time. I feel like every little bit of what makes Sega what it was is in this game. Platforming, racing, shooting, fishing. To me, Sonic Adventure is the quintessential Sega video game. It has everything you need to know about what made that company tick, for both better and worse. People really love to talk about things like care and ambition in video games. They like to use them to hold things up that didn't live up to their perceived potential and bust them out when the only thing the game did was live up to their shallow expectations. Sonic Adventure didn't age well. It's a rough transition into 3D. Sentiments I wholeheartedly disagree with. Every game has its problems, even re-releasing it may cause new problems. Heck, there are things in this game that aren't problems, but I think are just stuff people don't like. But this game This game is something special still to this day. The immense care to translate 2D gameplay into 3D, the ambition to shake up every character, to make a game world feel like more than just a hub world, to write a story unlike ever before, and express its characters like never before. While Sonic Team may have made many games try and feel similar to this in smaller, or maybe even worse ways, the original Sonic Adventure is a game special all its own. It's an experience you can't get anywhere else, and it's the start to a fantastic evolution of a franchise. I love 3D Sonic just as much as I love 2D Sonic, and I'm excited to continue talking about them. I never really know how to end these things. Oh wait, yes I do. Like, comment, subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you know when my next video comes out. I'm really excited to get to Sonic Adventure 2 because I don't have to put in as much work as I did this one. I already 100%ed that game. But until then, go watch my other Sonic content. That should keep you nice and warm until I eventually release a video within 2 months. Who's to say? Until we meet again, matao, until we meet again.